for having this conversation with me. I'm really excited to have this first conversation in Games new series, The Road Less Traveled, with you, not just because you are co-founder of Game, but because of your journey as an entrepreneur several times over.
Thank you.
The Road Less Traveled is a series of conversations focusing on stories of people following their passion, doing things differently, going against the grain, or just breaking free from conservative ideas of success. And we're hoping that through these conversations, we hope to inspire many people, not even if they don't become entrepreneurs, to be entrepreneurial. And I feel like you're a perfect first person to have a conversation with. And with that, I want to ask you my first question.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be a part of this, Sandhya. Always game.
That's a good starting point, Madan, for our chat. We in Game literally live in the world of entrepreneurship, and sometimes we can be delusional that everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but that really isn't true. People typically don't grow up thinking they want to be an entrepreneur. What was your turning point, Madan, when you said, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur?
So first of all, Sandhya, reflecting back, I don't even think I knew the word entrepreneur existed. It was only in B school that one heard the word entrepreneur. In engineering, which I did from Mysore, I don't think I'd ever heard the word entrepreneur as well. And this is like 20, 25 years ago. Entrepreneur is not a word that you heard very often. So I did the usual things, did my engineering like any other kid out then, either engineer or a doctor or whatever. So I did my engineering, worked in the early days of Wipro, fluid power. I was on the mechanical engineering side, then worked with Infosys for a brief period, went to do my MBA at SP Jain and got a job in a software company called BFL, now called Infosys, selling software to the Japanese in Japan and Korea.
And you were quite happy doing that.
I was very happy doing that. I don't think I ever thought that, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? Having said that, now if I look back, there were very many things I did that was very entrepreneurial from that sense. I was the president of my MeritTrac club in JP Nagar, which is as entrepreneurial as it can get. You start a MeritTrac club, you have to find your members, you have to find money, you do projects, you save money. So it's, in hindsight, it seems very entrepreneurial, but I did it for fun. It was joyful meeting a lot of young friends and hanging out together. I used to organize college festivals in my college, which I did for quite a number of years. So in hindsight, if I look back, they were entrepreneurial learnings, but it's only in hindsight. So I think the trigger for me was an interesting trigger. When I came back to Bangalore from Tokyo in 2000, almost everybody I knew was starting a business plan, was writing a business plan, was starting a business, talking to VCs. That was the buzz. And I was coming in
from Madan, which year would this have been?
This was 2000.
Okay.
I was in Japan in 99. 2000, I came back on a client visit, spent a month in Bangalore, and my mind was just fried because Bangalore had changed dramatically in 1.5, 2 years since I had left Bangalore. The turning point, so to speak, for me is an interesting one, right? There used to be a guy I used to hang around with in Chamarajpet, where I grew up in Bangalore. And this guy, somebody told me, listen, you know what? He's written a business plan. Some VC, and I had never heard the VC also term before. So I'd given him $1 million, which was a lot of money then, 4 crores or 5 crores or whatever. And boss, that guy's made it big. So somehow when we didn't have mobile phones, I tracked him. I went to his house. His mom told me that's where his office is. I went to his office. It was a swanky office. There was a pretty secretary who came out and told me, Mr. So-and-so will see you in half an hour. Please wait. And that half an hour I sat in his office. I was saying, this guy and I used to hang out having chai every day. And look what, he's got an office, a secretary. And he came, met me half an hour and told me, this is how I wrote a business plan. This is how the VC gave me. And I remember it was something about alternate money in those days. And I told him, that's such a dumb idea. He says, no, the VC thinks it's a great idea. And therefore I got money. Wow. So I remember coming out of the meeting saying, man, if this joker can do it, why can't I do it? Yeah. I think I'll have better ideas than
Why
this.
can't I have the secretary and the 5 crores?
Exactly. Exactly. Why can't I have a pretty secretary, the 5 crores? Right. So from that day onwards, my mind was in a tizzy. Every guy I met, I was saying, so do you have any idea for me? What can I do?
Mm.
And it was one such conversation with another friend of mine who I was pestering. Was from ex-Infosys, and he had started out on his own. So I went to meet him. He said, listen, I don't have any ideas, but I'm doing financial services. I have an idea for a product. Why don't you come and join me? You become a co-founder and you start that division. I said, what's the idea? The idea is some company has asked me to build a test bank management software, basically question bank management software. I said, what the hell is that? He says, no, this company does a lot of tests on people. They don't know which question they're using on who. So they need us to write a software. So you handle the non-financial services software division. I will do the financial services. We'll try and see what we can do. I said, sounds like an interesting idea, but who would pay money to do a question bank management software? He says, this large IT company wants us to do that. I said, let me come back to you in a few days. And off I went. And a few days later, I remember reading a NASSCOM McKinsey report, which said that the Indian IT industry will hire 1 million people in the next 10 years. And we were like less than 100,000 people way back in 2000. And that was another aha moment for me. I said, man, if so many people are going to get hired, that's when the question bank management software conversation made sense of saying, okay, the company has to hire so many people, they need so many tests, right? And the last dot to connect was a few days later, I was going to meet a friend in MG Road. And, for some of us who are from Bangalore, you'll recognize St. Joseph's Indian High School. I saw a board which says, walk in for an Infosys test. Somewhere, I suddenly stopped my bike and on a whim, I just went into that school. And I met an old colleague of mine from HR who was running around hassled, saying that, man, there are 400 people who turned up for a test. I have to run this test and declare interviews, results by the afternoon, declare interviews by the evening, and finally shortlist my employees or offers that I have to make at the end of the day. And I asked him, so after all this, how many offers will you make? He says, maybe 25, 30 people will get hired. I think that moment was when the light bulb kind of switched on, said, that is the problem we're trying to solve, right?
Wow.
Guys like this are running around helter-skelter to hire people, which means if 1 million people have to get added to the industry, and if the selection ratio is 1:10, 10 million people have to get tested. So the idea is not just a question bank management software, but a company that will provide testing as a service. That will do that, we'll design the test, we will do the test, we will shortlist, we'll arrange for interviews, we'll make your life easy. And that was how MeritTrac was born. Right? So it is interesting. 3 of us who co-founded MeritTrac, Murli, Mohan, and I, none of us came from any remote background related to HR, recruitment, assessment, testing, nothing. I was selling software in Japan. Mohan was writing code for a bank in London, and Murli was selling carpets for 3M.
Madan, and that's an amazing story, right? But and from the way you told it, it almost seems, and I'm sure the stars were aligned. One thing led to the other, right, from each of your conversations. But I'm sure there were fears, right? Because a job is a job, especially the way we know it.
Yeah.
It gives us a certain amount of money. Did you experience that, or were you so excited by this idea and convinced about it that you didn't really have a moment of fear of giving up something comfortable?
I was shit scared. In fact, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. There's the necessity entrepreneurs we talk about, opportunity. I think there's a third category, which is accidental.
Yes.
And that's an interesting story as well. So the notion of those days, as soon as we conceived the idea of MeritTrac, 3 of us, we sat down and wrote a business plan, right? We had this friend share a business plan format. This guy forwarded it to us. We copied word by word and replaced it by our business idea. And the notion of those days was that you approach a VC, some joker will fund you $1 million, and then you start off. So it was also fashionable to ask for $1 million. We also started going around asking for $1 million. So I must have met some 6-7 VCs. And all while all 3 of us in the job. By the way, the guy who gave me the software idea, we made him the technology partner.
Okay.
So I remember, and most of the VCs we were turned out because they said, "Hey, you guys know nothing about HR. What are you trying to build?" Secondly, in those days, it was fashionable to build a US-based revenue and India-based costs. And we were in India revenue, India cost model, so many VCs were not interested. One day, we got a meeting with a VC who used to be an ex-HR head of a large IT company, and he was reasonably known to us. So I thought, boss, this guy is our bakraya. We'll get $1 million, then I'll quit my job, safe, secure, I'll have money to last us for a lifetime. So we go to this meeting in Jainagar, and 20 minutes we're making the presentation. He stops us midway and says, so how many of you are in the job full time? How many of you are doing this full time? We looked at each other and said, what a dumb question. We said, sir, we're just waiting for someone like you to fund us, money, and we will quit.
Yeah.
We'll start. So he says, how much are you looking to raise? We said, $4 million. $1 million, 4 crores. He looked at me and said, what's your salary? And my salary was $1,000, 2.5 lakhs per annum at that point of time. So I said, 2.5 lakhs. He says, stop the presentation right now, get lost. I said, what happened? He says, you think you're entrepreneurs, you're nothing but con artists, right? You are trying to trick me to invest 4 crores into you, and you don't have the guts to quit your 2.5 lakh job. You're not entrepreneurs.
Wow.
He says, get out, quit your jobs, get me your first customer, then we'll talk. So our meeting ended there.
Wow.
So Murli, Mohan and I came out looking at each other saying, what a joker here. He doesn't understand how the VC world works and all that. After a coffee and reflection, 5 minutes later, we are looking at each other and saying, what the guy said made sense.
The joke's on you in a sense, right?
So Murli and Mohan look at me and saying, somebody's got to quit their job. I said, why are you looking at me?
Were you a bachelor at that point?
I was a bachelor at that time. Murli, incidentally, is my co-brother. He's married to my sister, so family ka sawal hai. I can't ask him to quit and all that stuff. So I said, okay, let me think about it. And I went back home. And next day I said, let me do a deal on my boss. So very sweet gentleman called Mohan. He is the managing director of BFL. I usually comes to office early. So I went early, caught up with him. And he is also asking me, where have you vanished 15 days? Because I used to slip out of office for these meetings. So Mohan, I told him this idea and he says, fantastic idea. I think it'll work well. What do you want to do? So I told Mohan, I have a deal. Give me a 6-month sabbatical. You can pay me like half salary. Like I was so condescending. You can pay me half salary. I'll manage somehow. Right. And if it works at the end of 6 months, I will quit. If it doesn't work, I will come back. He says, I said, does it sound like a fair deal? And for the second time in less than 24 hours, I was asked to get out of the room. Said,
that became your thing.
Yeah, he says, entrepreneurs are not made this way. You have to cut your lifeline. He says, if I give you a lifeline, you'll always come back. I can assure you not in 6 months, but 3 months, you'll be back. So he says, I think you're just kidding yourself that you want to be an entrepreneur. Go finish the proposal, get back to Japan. Don't waste my time. I was seething. I was saying, what the hell, yeah? So I went back to my desk, and I wrote an email to Mohan saying, thank you for your advice. I think I made my decision. I want to quit, and please accept my resignation.
Wow, you at that point went back to the security of the job.
Yeah, I went back to the security of the job. And in my mind, I'm thinking, see, Mohan is a guy who's not a fast decision taker. I said, anyway, I'll meet him on lunch or dinner or breakfast. Somehow in 3 days, I'll cajole him and I'll somehow get my sabbatical. So, and this was my ploy to tell him that I'm serious about it. Okay. Within 20 minutes, Mohan has mailed me back, copying my entire department, saying, we have our first entrepreneur of our group. Let us wish Madan all the very best in his journey.
Oh, wow. So
and I was out of my job.
He probably spotted it before you then.
Exactly. And incidentally, as I was quitting, my exit interview was actually a proposal pitch to BFL. I was making a proposal saying, how do you work with me?
No, sometimes you have it and you need somebody else to spot that, right?
So I remember him with so much of gratitude even now, saying, Mohan, if you had given me a lifeline, I would have come back in 90 days and I would have never been an entrepreneur.
And Madan, I want to come back to this point later about networks and ecosystems, right? Because it's not a one-man journey. It really
Exactly.
needs a village, right?
Exactly.
But I
Exactly.
want to now segue to your first 100 days.
Hmm.
Mohan has decided you're an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
You now don't have a job. You have no choice but to follow this entrepreneurial journey. I'd
Yeah.
love for you to talk about that, your first 100 days.
So the first shocking thing to my parents, and they were pretty supportive. My dad is an entrepreneur or a businessman, so to speak, and he's always been there. So it was really, they were a bit shocked that I gave up some job in Japan and I'm trying to do something which has no connection whatsoever to anybody has done in our family. So it took a while for them to accept it, but they were saying, okay, it's your life, you figure it out. So the first thing was that I had all of 1 lakh rupee in the bank, and each of us decided to put in 25,000 rupees to start the company, out of which 15,000 rupees went into registering the company itself. Incidentally, in a month's time, MeritTrac turns 20 years. So this is like a great
Wow.
time to recount the story.
It's a great time to have this conversation.
Yeah. And and the other thing I did was to cut down my lifestyle completely. So I had a car which I sold off. I was, because I was staying with the parents and my dad was still earning, I was able to bring my expenses down to 5,000. So the first thing that I mentally in my mind I thought was, I have 1 lakh in the bank. At 5,000 rupees, I can survive for 20 months. Right? So what is the worst thing that can happen? At the end of 20 months, nothing could have happened in MeritTrac. I'll go back and find a job. I'm qualified enough, I'll find a job. Two, I'd have lost 1 lakh. So in my mind, I was thinking, take care. 1.5 years of investment, you're still like 25, 26 at that point of time. And 1 lakh investment, I'll earn back. So the first thing that you frame yourself is, what is the worst thing that can happen? And can you live with that? In hindsight, I can say that, but that was my comfort. I was saying, okay, I'll give this at least 1 year, if not
You
anything.
had the cushion
I had the cushion.
for a year. Yeah.
And I think that cushion is critical. Not that I had some crazy amount. I mean, those days, 5,000 rupees a month itself was reasonable, right? For some
Absolutely.
etc. The second thing was, what does the idea look like? So what does MeritTrac do? So we spent a lot of time defining how will you do a test, etc. We started learning, but the biggest thing was, where will you find customers? Right? So my first job was go get one customer. And interestingly, in that time in the city, I knew no one in HR except the HR head of BFL, whom I had already made a proposal, and he was dismissive, saying that I don't think this will work.
So you were literally starting from a blank slate.
Literally a blank slate, right? And I was wondering, so how do you go meet these IT companies? Because you can't generally barge in. And so my first 100 days was trying to identify customers, and I tried all sorts of crazy stunts, right? I still remember one of the things I did, and it's just stumbled on it, was that you have to meet senior guys in IT industry, and many of them fly in and out of the city. So I thought, hey, why don't I go hang around at the airports? Anyway, I have nothing else to do. So I think for a month, intermittently, every day morning between 6:30 or 7 to 9, I used to be in the airport. And it was funny, right?
This was the old airport, Madan?
The old airport road, Bangalore, the old airport. And obviously no mobile phones then, right? So you used to have these people standing, these drivers standing with placards.
Yes.
And the placards was very interesting, right? It will say Mr. So-and-so from Oracle, Mr. So-and-so from SAP. And there was my prospect list. I used to go look at a board and say, okay, Oracle guy is there. Let me go stand next to the guy, the driver. So this Oracle senior guy used to come, and obviously used to come searching for the board, which means he used to come to me. And when the driver went to get the car, I had 5 minutes to make my pitch and introduce myself and say, oh, you're from Oracle. I'm running this company called MeritTrac. Here is my card. Can I come and meet you? I think I must have got my first 10 or 15 meetings from meeting people at the airport.
Wow. Did you freak people out at any point?
No, it was funny because they weren't expecting somebody to come and make a sales pitch. But the important part was that
so you used the surprise element.
Yeah, and when I used to email, I used to say, oh, I'm the guy you met at the airport. They always used to remember me.
Wow.
Okay, and my first contact came through that. In fact, the guy is a good friend. He still tells me, boss, you're a nutcase to come and hold me at the airport.
No, but that was ingenious. When I think about it, to have thought about it was
Yeah,
to
I
be
mean,
engineer.
it's desperation. You don't know where to start. So you begin somewhere. You start with what you have on hand. I said, okay, here is a place where they come. Let me go hang out there.
And
So
what did that lead to, Madan?
So it led me to meetings. It led me to people asking me for some proposals. It led us to define our proposition better. In fact, from a network standpoint, my first customer was Wipro. And Wipro connection happened because I was in Wipro earlier and I got a sympathetic ear in Wipro. And we got our first client in less than 4 months of starting off. Right? So I think
And I feel like, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to highlight that point because I feel it's important. I feel like sometimes we forget that there are contacts in our network that we can tap on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, there are always, so I think the first 100 days, I learned 2-3 things. One is that you have to go find customers, otherwise you don't have a business. So find somehow. Two, ask shamelessly. I used to ask everybody, oh, who do you know in HR? And even if it's a junior HR person, I remember traveling all the way to ITPL was inaugurated then in 2001, and there was nothing. There was just that one building. I remember going to that building every other day, all the way from Jainagar, because I used to go meet some junior HR person who used to give me some gyan. So network, meet people like crazy. And third, keep continuously defining your value proposition, right? I mean, we knew nothing in assessments. But every conversation I was learning, and I used to use the learning of the previous conversation, the next conversation, and I used to get another ounce of learning.
So what was your value proposition?
So our value proposition was simple. We used to go tell HR guys that we will give your Sundays back to you and we will get you good quality talent. So outsource your testing.
Yeah.
Right? And that we refined over a period of time. And then we had to learn about testing. I mean, we never even imagined that testing is such a crazy science. That psychometrics is such a huge science. We thought, hey, test ka matlab kya hai yaar? Some 20 questions in our paper, we'll go figure it out. But there's so much of science behind it that we learned the science of it. Right? So I would say learning, meeting customers, having conversations, and continuously refining your value proposition. Right? What are you offering that will be of value to your customer, and how can you keep increasing that value?
What else happened in your first 100 days? There must have been days when you said, I didn't know this, or I can't figure this out.
Lots of it. Lots of it. What else? So the other first 100 days, I would say 100 days, see, the point that we quickly realized was people knew us. Didn't know us, right? They didn't know MeritTrac, they didn't know Madan, Mohan, Murli, and we didn't know anybody there. So we had to build our credibility. So in fact, that's when I realized that they are distant relatives of mine. There's, again, through some relative circle, I ended up meeting another couple who were ex-IMB professors who were specialists in testing. So we went and met them, fell at their feet and said, we are beginning a testing company. Can you be our knowledge partners? Can you teach us something about testing? So I remember 3 of us used to go spend entire Sunday and Saturday with them, where they used to give us gyan on testing. So we were learning. So at least the next meeting, we could throw some few jargons and impress others that we also know our stuff. Right?
So learning is so critical, right? I mean, you have to know it better than anybody else.
Exactly. And it's a continuous process. Right? And Vijay and Bandan Padaki really helped us with that. The second thing was an interesting thing. I still remember, again, these are shots you take, right? So as an entrepreneur, in the not first 100 days, I do that even now, you have to take moonshots every day. Right? So one of the moonshots was, I don't know if you remember, Sandhya, during those days, there used to be a column in Times of India called Mindsport. It used to be crazy puzzles that was coming every Sunday.
Absolutely.
Written by a guy called Mukul Sharma. So one day Murli was reading that, and he was amongst the 3 of us, he was the puzzles freak. So suddenly he said, hey, what if we had Mukul Sharma to advise us? I said, how will we reach out to him? He says, there's a snail mail address. I still remember that address in 125 Shushantlo, Gurgaon, something.
Wow.
So Murli said, why don't we write to him? I said, yeah, why don't we write to him? So I took a postcard wrote that address and wrote a brief, a postcard, right? So you just write a few lines saying we are starting a testing company. We would very much like your advice. We had also acquired a telephone number then. Here is our telephone number. We would love to speak to you. So I posted letter, forgot about it. 8 days later, a call comes to the landline saying, hey, this is Mukul speaking. I got your post and I thought I'll return your call.
Wow.
And my hand was trembling. I never expected him to call us. Right? He's a legend in the space. And he did. He called. And many times I know, why did he call? We became dear friends. And I always used to ask him, Mukul, why did you call? He says, I don't know. He says, I received thousands of letters. Somehow I spotted your letter and I called you. And at the end of the 1 hour, I had spoken to Mukul, told him about MeritTrac. And he says, yeah, what do you need? I said, can you be our advisor? He said, yeah, happy to help. And I was saying, Mukul, sir, we don't have any money to pay you. He says, no worry. When you make money, you give me money. Otherwise, I'm happy to help you. And that gave us so much of confidence that a guy like Mukul Sharma is happy to advise 3 guys who know nothing.
And sometimes it's as simple as asking.
It's just
right?
simple. No, and also when I asked Mukul, what prompted you to tell yes? He says the earnestness in your voice. I realized you guys were very, very earnest about doing what you wanted to do. Right? And Mukul was an invaluable name. So it used to be funny. We used to carry the Mindsport column newspaper. Whenever anybody says, what do you know about testing? I used to put the newspaper on the table and say, hey, do you know this guy who writes this column? He's been doing it for 20 years. And most often then they would say, yeah, Mindsport. He says, Mukul is our advisor. Now let's talk. If you want, I can get Mukul on the call. Nobody ever asked us to call Mukul. Neither did Mukul receive any call from any customer. But they thought, oh, if these guys are working with Mukul, these guys must be good.
You know, your story reminds me of Steve Jobs' famous quote, stay hungry, stay foolish. Clearly, you were foolish and open to opportunity. You've given us some context to networks, but I want to go back to other areas, Madan, of the first 100 days of the importance of cash and capacity and customers, irrespective of who believes in you or not. As an entrepreneur, you need all of those 3 things.
No, there's some interesting stories on cash. You know, we talked about customers, we talked about capacity that we were learning all the time, right? We had to build advisory boards, we had to create networks. And one of the other phenomenal advisors, and this was a personal connection, I had actually done an event in National Institute of Advanced Studies through MeritTrac, and the chairman of National Institute of Advanced Studies was Dr. Raja Ramana. I don't know if you remember him, the legendary nuclear physicist.
Yes.
And I had interacted with him once or twice. When I started MeritTrac, again, when I was in ISC, I just took a chance and went to NIAS and barged into Dr. Ramana's room. And he fortunately remembered me and we had coffee together. And somehow I had the temerity to ask him, sir, will you be on our advisory board? And he says, yeah, I will. I'm happy to be. And Dr. Ramana joined our board. In fact, if you look at the background, I still have his letter on my table as a reminder of how gratitude has to flow back.
Yes.
Right? And he, at that point of time, had just retired as a defense minister of India.
Wow.
And having Dr. Ramana's name on our board was such a phenomenal confidence booster for us. Right? Yeah. So this is about how do you build networks? How do you build your advisory boards? How do you engage, right? Of course, we had to raise money. Banks obviously were not touching us. VCs were throwing us out of the room. And somebody told us, listen, angels didn't exist in the formal capacity, but somebody told us you should talk to high net worth individuals. They can not fund you 4 crores, but they can give at least 30, 50 lakhs, which itself was a lot of money then. So we started talking to some chartered accountants, and one of them led us to a guy called Ranganath. Ranganath used to be he's still a coffee planter in Shimoga. And he organized a meeting. I still remember going to the meeting in NG Road, one of the hotels, and pitching to him. And Ranganath's face was the most stoic, passive face. 1 hour, he asked nothing except at the end, he asked, excuse me, and that's what he's going to ask us a question. He says, do you want coffee or tea? I still remember.
So coffee and tea played a big role in your journey.
Yeah. So Murli and I remember coming out of the meeting, cursing ourselves, saying, what low life we are, yeah? I was sitting in Japan, Murli, you were in 3M. Now we are pitching to some agriculturist in Shimoga to invest in a testing business. He can't even understand what testing is. What the hell are we doing? Okay. Interestingly, a week later, Ranganath called us back and said, tell me more. And he thought we were an IT company. And how much we told him we are not IT? He says, you use technology? Yes, we use technology. Oh, you're an IT company. And he was very fixated on investing in the IT company. So our investor, our advisor, the chartered accountant told, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you are an IT company for him. You are a testing company for yourself. You take the money. You anyway need the money. Right? So agreement and all that. And he said, I'll invest some 30-40 lakhs. No problem. We went to Shimoga to sign the agreement. And it was a big deal. This happened in about 6 or 7 months after starting off in September. We started in August formally. In December, we had him sign the agreement. I still remember we signed the agreement. He didn't understand what a shareholders agreement was, SHA was. The only thing I kept repeating was your 50 lakhs that you're investing or 1 crore investing is equity. If something goes wrong, I am not beholden to give the money back to you. That's what the basic understanding.
You were saving your
yeah, and that was his first angel investment. He had never made an angel investment before. So I was trying to impress on that. So I still remember at the end of the day, he took me on a walk of his farm. And he says, so Madan, what happens if the business fails? I said, business fails, I go back to a job and that's it, right? He says, what happens to my money? I said, I told you, it's in the agreement that as per this agreement, if the business shuts down, I don't owe you anything. He looked at me in the eye. He says, Madan, if you lose even 1 rupee of mine, I'm going to hound you for the rest of my life. Okay, you better return that money.
So you had to succeed.
I have a mind to say, hey man, you signed this agreement. I'll hold the agreement to you. But the other one telling me, this guy has trusted me enough to give me 1 crore or 50 lakhs or whatever. I can't let go of his trust. So I solemnly swore to him saying, Mr. Ranganath, if anything goes wrong, I will work the rest of my life and pay your money back. Except don't ask me for interest, which was the concession we made.
Yeah.
So the learning from this was that it's not about cash, it's about trust. Right? People trust you with something. So when I think when a bank manager is signing off a loan to you, he would have done a variety of due diligence documents, but finally the signature happens on trust. But
that's the first part of trust, no, Madan?
And
it's
you have
following through.
Yeah. Exactly. Right? And there's I know we are running way over time, but there's another interesting story which shaped my life for a long time to come, which is again related to cash, not in the first 100 days, but maybe 3 years. Because one of the things we didn't understand well enough in cash is that the line which says you can go out of business profitably. So at the end we went through a roller coaster ride, but at the end of 4 years, we were growing rapidly. We were doubling sales every month. Okay, so 1 month was 2 lakhs, 4 lakhs, 8 lakhs, 16 lakhs. So it was like insane growth. And we had, by the time, of course, Ranganath had, in the 2001-2 bust had gone bust. He didn't have money. So we were literally living on customer receivables. But the receivables were 90 days.
Wow.
Right? But we had to pay monthly. So Mohan, Murli and I were borrowing from family, friends, credit cards, whatever, and pumping in money. So we used to pump in 3 lakhs. We used to get 6 lakhs at the end of 90 days. We used to take that money back, return and borrow again. And this was happening for 2-3 months till we met a guy called Ashish Gupta, who made his mark and wealth in, he was the first Indian millionaire, so to speak. He built a company called Jungli that he sold to Amazon. Way back in 97, and later on he became a VC. He was an angel investor then, and he was also an angel investor in one of my client companies, and I met him on the cafeteria of that company. Somebody told me, "Is Ashish?" I went to introduce myself. I said, "Sir, we are doing this with you." Somehow he got interested. He said, "Why don't you meet me tomorrow and tell me more about you guys?" So Murli, Mohan and I went to that meeting, which was like 2 hours. Ended up spending 4 hours. And Ashish's prognosis at the end of that 4 hours was, "You're going to die next month." He says, "Boss, you have 2 lakhs in the bank. You have 16 lakhs of revenue, which will get paid 3 months later, which means you have to fund 12 lakhs tomorrow. Where is 12 lakhs? I said, three of us looked at it. He says, boss, all of us, even if we sell everything we have, including the shirts we have, we won't be able to raise more than 3 lakhs. He says, so, which means you're basically down 10 lakhs. If you can't pay, people will throw you out of your rental places. Suppliers will ask, how will you survive? He said, we never thought about that. He says, yeah. And if you look at your growth for the next 6 months, you won't need 10 lakhs, you'll need 40 lakhs. And I remember coming out of the meeting, my head splitting, saying, I've never thought about this, right? We're going to die. So desperately, so it was a weekend. And I called back Ashish that Sunday night saying, Ashish, you've really hit the truth hard. What do you do? Yeah. Where is the money? What do you suggest? So, the beauty of it was Ashish in that phone call said, listen, I'm happy to help you. Send me your bank account. I'm wiring 40 lakhs to your account tomorrow.
Wow.
No paperwork, nothing. And in a week's time, we had 40 lakhs in the bank. Ashish, of course, we did the paperwork, subsequently came on board as an investor and a board member, and his presence was invaluable. But I shudder to think what at that point of time, Ashish, we had not met him and he had not extended this line to us, we would have been dead.
And Madan, it leads me very nicely to my next question, right? Because it's about two things. One about traits that entrepreneurs need to have, but also in a lot of ways you've suggested luck, right? What next for an entrepreneur? What if you... And I want to go back to being very specific. I'm also conscious that because this has been such a fabulous story, we've gone way over time, but I want to go back to anybody that's listening. Two things. One, what would you have done differently?
Yeah.
Right? And the second, what's the one trait that held you in good stead?
So, what would I have done differently? In the MeritTrac days, I can't think of anything else that I would have done. So, for example, coming back to the traits, right? I believe that you need to have insane customer centricity. That you have to have that belief that I'm here to die for the customer, right? Which we had because we were really making a difference to every customer we worked with. Secondly, you need to have a foolish belief in yourself. You have to be persistent, right?
Persistence is important, right?
Super critical. We had several near-death experiences in the first 3-4 years, but we never gave up. Somewhere in the heart of hearts, I believed in the idea and myself, and we as a team, right? Third thing I would say, I would go beyond trust into truth, and have to embrace the truth and encourage and trust and help others to trust you. Trust doesn't come like that, right? But if you're truthful, not only to yourself, to people around you, people see that, okay, whatever happens, this guy is not going to lie, not going to falsify, not going to run away, right? At the very basic level. So I think when you say luck, I believe in two things. One is that fortune favors the brave. So you need to try out n number of things. Right? And if you don't try, it'll never happen. If you don't ask, it'll never come. Secondly is, I think luck, as they say, is like 99% perspiration and 1%.
Perspiration. Yes.
So you have to struggle. You have to, first 4 years, I don't think I ever took a Saturday, Sunday off.
It's funny. I just saw some quote on LinkedIn that says the secret sauce to success is hard work.
Yeah. Hard work and hard plus smart, right? You need to. Yeah. So maybe in hindsight, we would have done things a little smarter. We were too naive. Many times we used to.
That was the stay foolish bit of you.
Yeah, and I still believe that it's better to stay foolish than to stay safe.
Yes. No, right. Madan, this was the story I was hoping this conversation would be. I want to quickly, I know there are areas we haven't delved into, but just because we have time as a mediator, I want to jump into how you moved from MeritTrac to OneBridge. That, that was another entrepreneurial experience, right?
Yeah,
An adventure.
yeah, it
How
continues.
do you go from being successful, having money in your bank, and still being foolish?
I think you enjoy over a period of time being foolish, right? That's one. Two is I realized that, MeritTrac, I had never thought of the social impact, even though a lot of people tell us that, listen, what you did for the industry then was path-breaking in
Mm.
terms of number of jobs that got enabled, because we used to go into a city which no one has gone before, and we used to test people there. And we were talent spotting, right? But I never framed it like that. My second foray, be it into Head and Eye Foundation, which morphed into where I morphed that my thought process into Head and Eye Services and then Ruben Bridge, was all about the quest saying, what if I took money out of the equation, but focused on making a difference first and then figuring out how to make money? So, how does life at the intersection of feel good, do good, and make good money happen? That is the quest.
Did that happen because you had money?
I think so, to a large extent, right?
Okay.
I think to an extent, from the lower middle class family I come from, the God has been kind enough to close one cycle of an entrepreneurial journey where I said, listen, this money is likely to be enough to last me a lifetime. I'm happy. Now, what can I do to feed my foolishness and the area of impact? But at the same time, I need an entrepreneurial rush, right? So even now, people ask me, so why are you going to the villages and breaking your head about digital access, about entrepreneurs in the villages? Why can't you do it in towns and cities? I keep saying that, listen, when somebody asked Edmund Hillary, why did you climb the Mount Everest? He said his answer was, because it's there.
Exactly.
Right. So I'm very, very taken in by the entrepreneurial challenge. It's tough. It's hard. OneBridge, we've had several near-death experiences. We've been now beaten down to almost to death by COVID, but we are persisting. And I hold back the same beliefs that if you stay true to customers, persist, learn every day, and hold truth as supreme, we will win.
No, and those are good lessons, Madan. I want to ask you one more question, and more in your OneBridge, right? For me, I feel like that was your coming of age experience. I feel like MeritTrac was you making it happen, and OneBridge was more of a choice, right? I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
that's my interpretation. I'd love for you to share with our audience an experience or a story of success or inspiration to you that's not you, or people that inspired you, not the Steve Jobs or someone that invested in you, but the everyday person
Yeah.
that made a difference.
Yeah. Well, there are thousands of stories, Sandhya. I'm amazed, be it in Headed High or through OneBridge or the stories that we hear at Game. How much of an entrepreneurial energy and spirit that is lurking in everybody. It is just that we don't have the capability to recognize it in every human being. And I, for one, believe that everyone has infinite potential. It is that just that a lot of us die without knowing what treasures lie within. So I'll give you another one example, which kind of really, if you look back at the Game hypothesis, this happened about 6 years ago in a remote place, remote village near Gadag in the northern Karnataka. So in those days, I used to go from village to village trying to find out who the entrepreneurs are in the local village who we can work with. Somebody told us about this guy who was making washing powder. So we went to his factory, which was like the outskirts
Like
of
clothes or utensils or?
No, he used to do the surf and Nirma competition.
Okay, the clothes. Yeah.
And it was a ramshackle building. We go in, we see about 120 women working. Finally, we meet this guy. He's a 50-year-old entrepreneur who has built this brand called Appu Washing Powder. Okay, so I start chatting up with him. He says he was a civil contractor who lost money 4 years ago because he invested in some project which never took off. He said, I didn't know what to do. Somebody told me that, boss, why don't you, the water in Gadag is hard water. Most of the detergents are not working. So maybe there's an idea if you try to build a detergent that will wash well in hard water. That was his thought process. Incidentally, he had a basic bachelor's degree in chemistry. So he says that idea appealed to me, and in 1 year, he figured a way to make washing powder that will wash clothes well. So I was asking, what is your, what do you feel proud about? He says, about a year ago, he was on a bus ride and he was sitting next to a guy who used to be the PNG salesman for PNG in that region. And he overheard him talking to his boss, telling that this Appu guys have really beaten us black and blue in the market. Everywhere people are buying only Appu, they are not buying Surf Excel or whatever.
Wow.
That gave me the thing that I can take these guys on and build a local product that can create. And he had created jobs for 120 women.
Wow.
He was doing turnover of 40 lakhs those days on a monthly basis.
Wow.
I still get goosebumps when I think of that guy, right? Imagine at 50-year-old or 45-year-old losing all your money as a civil contractor, trying your hand in doing something very, very different, yet succeeding like crazy and creating jobs for 120 women in that village.
You know, every time I have a conversation with you, Madan, you leave me with a story that makes me think, right? And this was a story. I want to, because I'm also conscious of the audience we have. Hopefully, we'll have a wide audience of people wanting to try new things, be entrepreneurial, maybe be entrepreneurs. Do you have a story of inspiration, of an entrepreneur story that still lives with you, that you want to tell? Or if it's the previous one, I'm happy to go with that. But if you have another one.
Yeah, so again, this can go on for hours, but maybe I'll end with another story somewhere in the same era, which is really what got me started thinking about entrepreneurship. So again, somewhere in Koppal, I visit a carpenter. This guy is a 10th standard fail, works and creates his own tables and chairs. You know, I was asking him, so how do you find customers, right? And he says, sir, of course, I can't advertise. I don't have the money. I don't have time to even print pamphlets. But he says, when I do a delivery, but he says, now I get 5 to 10 orders every month. How do you do that? He says, when I finish an order, the customer pays me some 200, 300 rupees to deliver the order, the sofa or a table or a chair to his house, and pays me the tractor fee, right? He says, I pay the tractor fellow another 200 rupees more, and I ask him to take the most circuitous route to reach the village. And I put my nephew on that tractor, and every village he stops, beats the drum and says, this sofa is going to so-and-so's house in this village. If you want something like this, call this number.
Wow.
The ingenuity of it blew my mind. I was saying, listen, he's done a customer reference, he has done demo, and he's done a sales lead generation all at the same cost.
Wow.
You don't
amazing. And things B school can't teach you about, right?
Exactly, right? So that's when I got convinced that, boss, there is an entrepreneurial story and an entrepreneurial energy that's lurking everywhere. If we can unearth it, give it wings, and get everybody else to get inspired by these people at every local level. That is entrepreneurship.
Fabulous, Madan. And I want to make it more personal now, because typically it's great to say amazing things. And I've loved your story because you've followed your path. But when it comes to your son and daughter, and I know you have a son and daughter,
very, very
would
young.
you encourage them to be entrepreneurs?
I think you're asking in the future tense. I'm speaking in the past tense. So when I speak to Varun and anybody asks him what do you want to be, he already says I want to be an entrepreneur.
Does he understand entrepreneur?
He sees me day in and day out. And I keep telling stories of what I go through.
And he still wants to be an entrepreneur. So that's a good one, right? You're leading by example.
To kind of spell entrepreneur or pronounce entrepreneur very quickly, which he's trying.
No, is she trying at the background?
He's trying at the background. You can hear her now.
Oh, and that works. Madan, I want to end our conversation. I'm going to go to a rapid fire, but before a rapid fire, I want a bit of gyan, right? What would you say to budding entrepreneurs? What's the thrill? What's, not all of us can be entrepreneurs. But I still, you've had a job, you've earned money, you've had the challenge of being an entrepreneur. What's your one message to someone who can be an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial?
Sure. So 2 parts, Sandhya, as you said, entrepreneurial. I would argue that whether you're an entrepreneur or not, in that formal sense, everybody has to be entrepreneurial. I take you. I mean, you're one of the most entrepreneurial persons I've ever met as well, Sandhya. And you bring that entrepreneurial energy to game.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And so is a lot of people that we interact. I would think the entire game team is very entrepreneurial. And all the people that I've worked with at MeritTrac, at Manipal, at Herald High, everybody is entrepreneurial.
It's about being the change, right, Madan?
Yeah. So I don't think anybody has a choice of not being entrepreneurial. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to believe in something much beyond yourself. And, one of the telling videos for me, and this, we played it on the game platform several times, is Sharon Tea Stall, when Daniel Muniswamy says that the greatest joy he gets is because he's able to fend for 20 families, and 20 families as employees believe in it. Right? And he says we wake up at 4:30, we work hard, but he says the satisfaction I get from seeing 20 families smile because of me. I think it's elevating oneself much beyond their own self to care for the community. And if you care for the community, you'll move. And if you're entrepreneurial, you have no choice but to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Madan. And every day, much as you and I will disagree about a lot of things, you inspire me to be entrepreneurial.
Thank
you. I want to ask you a bunch of questions.
Okay, shoot.
Who's your entrepreneurial or entrepreneur icon?
Lots of them. I would say people like Daniel of Sharon Tea Stall, or Apu, the Apu powder chap. I think these are the ones who inspire me.
The mistake you've made, you would advise entrepreneurs starting out not to make?
Is to hold yourself true to the mission and not get swayed by emotions.
Okay. No, that's powerful. According to you, the most important entrepreneurial trait
is to imagine a world that no one else is imagining. Imagining a better world that no one else can or is imagining at this point of time.
So pushing the envelope.
Yeah, I think connecting the dots. Every entrepreneurial journey begins by imagining something which is not happening currently.
Right? The most overrated entrepreneurial trait,
I would say, is bravado. I don't think courage is the absence of fear. So the swashbuckling entrepreneur who gets everything done, faces all things. All of us are afraid, but it is the ability to conquer that fear that matters. So somewhere the myth is that, oh, you're so brave. I don't think there's bravery here.
No, that's powerful. Failing and learning, or success without learning?
If you don't fail, you don't learn. Right? And I think you got to figure out a fail fast, fail forward process.
Okay. 5 years from now, what would you like to be doing?
Exactly the same thing I'm doing today.
So you're owning your life.
Building businesses
Finally,
with folks like you.
finally, Madan, I've enjoyed this conversation with you. But I also know, if I've known you a little bit, and I think I know you well because you and I connect, a quote which inspires you.
There's several, but the one that I think is very entrepreneurial, and this is by St. Francis of Assisi, who says, "You start by doing what is necessary, then you're doing what's possible, and suddenly you're doing the impossible."
With that, thank you, Madan. I enjoyed this conversation with
Thank you
you.
so much.
And I'm hoping everybody that listens into this conversation understands that the road less traveled is a good road to travel. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for putting this together. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. Take care.